But what I wanted to talk about today was my passion around branding, and particularly how do you apply that to yourself? This comes from a sort of 20 years working in industry, which I'll talk about, but also increasingly I have developed and lead a course for our final year undergrads in the business school around personal branding and professional practice. And I feel very passionate that that's not just about the functional stuff, about how well you do at interview or what your CV looks like, but to help people find their path and have a voice. So that's what I'm going to cover about today. But I want to start with a discussion, really. For those of you who are not familiar, this is Prince Harry, second in line to the throne, third in line to the throne. And I just want to, if I'm going to stop sharing, when you think about his brand, can you come up with some words? Just take yourself off mute. For those of you who are familiar with him. I'm going to pick on Nicolette. Can you think of one word? If you had to describe Prince Harry's brand, one word.
Maverick.
Maverick, interesting. Joy?
I'm troubled.
Troubled, yes, a bit of that. What about you, Gina?
Sensitive.
Okay, sensitive, interesting.
Anti-establishment.
Anti-establishment, that fits very well with the Maverick thing. I think there's a bit of a theme coming out there as well. What about anybody else? If you had to describe Harry as a brand, what would you say? What's your, because it's only your perception, right? Because you're picking this up for, it's based on, I got to show my hand here and say I'm a royalist. I am married to a Republican who would get rid of the royal family tomorrow. He hasn't. I honestly have the first day editions of the stamps and the mugs, and anyway, I go the other way. So yeah, we have the great divide amongst many things in our family, but that's okay. What about you others? Are you familiar with Prince Harry? Do you see him in the news?
He's hypocritical. I can't even say the word.
Okay, hypocritical. Yeah. So not a sort of straightforward story. If you see what I mean. Yeah.
I'll say daring.
Daring. Okay. So you think he's if you think he's sort of taking his own path.
I do.
Standing up for his family. That's interesting. Yeah, and I think that's a perception that's particularly coming across in America as well. Someone who sort of stands up for what they believe in, but got this troubled past as well. We're going to go back and share the screen. So see if it'll come back. Yeah. Here's some images I thought about, and I was trying to persuade when I thought about him as a brand. And if we start, it's quite interesting, the sort of the army pictures that come out from him and his time in Iraq. Lots of sort of rugby playing, obviously it's very serious polo. We've got the sporty action man type of thing. And that leads very interestingly onto his work and setting up the Invictus Games. So very natural fit for branding, being sporty, a voice into helping the injured veterans. On the right-hand side, we've got the troubled past. We've got the, loving mother, particularly. I'm father as well, but gets less publicity. But obviously the incidents around her death, which really feature in a lot of the conversations. So when you see him on things like Oprah and the book and things like that, that comes out again and again. So it's obviously a big part of his brand is the Diana link. And then you have the charity work, which is obviously Sensibility, so carrying on her legacy. So you see that element of the brand. So it's a story that comes through. It's quite consistent. And at the bottom, we've got some pretty famous friends. The two of them winning the sort of Kennedy Award, for example, standing up for what they believe in, and the Oprah stuff. So you can see it's quite complicated, but there are some definite branding strands that I'm sure someone advising him has put together in quite a clever way. And we were having a discussion before about, does it all feel like it fits? I'm not sure it does, but he's still pretty young and he's finding his way. But you can see that there's some elements here, sports and army, rich friends and position, and the family background, the charity link coming through in his brand. But let's just take a step back a minute. What do you actually talk about when we're talking about personal branding? And I love this quote from Jeff Bezos. It gets quoted a lot, but really it's, what do people say about you when you're not in the room? So it's thinking about words like reputation, you know, what are you known for? What do you stand for? And not all of that is work. Now, what are you like? Another way of looking about this is, if you actually don't put the effort in creating your brand, then maybe you're just a commodity. If we think about branding of goods and services, if you don't have a strong brand, then actually what's the added value? Yeah, so I found that quite an interesting way of thinking about branding. The other thing is saying, well, what's it all for? You know, if we're thinking about help versus hype, why would you want to put the energy and effort into building your own personal brand? And some of that for me, as I say, isn't about the functional stuff. Can you do a good interview? But it's actually about trying to find a fulfilling path. I've recently been reading a book called 4,000 Weeks, which if you haven't read, I really recommend. It's quite a thin paperback, doesn't take long to read. But it's about saying, well, the average life is about 4,000 weeks if you're lucky. What are you going to do with the time? And about having agency for your own life and going, what's your path? And so for me, it's a lot more than about communication. It's about what's my journey and how am I trying to find that? There is clear evidence, though, that if you have a strong personal brand, actually some of these hidden things get unlocked. And for example, hidden jobs. The numbers vary, but we're really clear with students when we teach them that actually a lot of, if you go beyond the grad schemes, there are a lot of jobs out there, but they don't come through an Indeed, they don't come through the big grad schemes. And if you're known for something, then quite often people will come to you. Out of the jobs I've had, so as I say, I started on a grad scheme with Tate & Lyle, which I definitely applied for normally. And after my MBA, I applied for normally. All the others I've got have been created opportunities. So they have created the job for me to do. And those have been fantastic. And that includes working at Tesco. So it's really interesting how that market works, and we just don't see it. For people in business, the other thing about having a strong brand is actually through your reputation, you win work. And this is particularly true if you, for example, have your own business or if you work in an agency. Word of mouth is absolutely fundamental. So your personal brand is part of that. Yes, they'll judge on whether the work is any good, but also the process of whether working with you, you know, was fun and worthwhile. And that's how your reputation spreads. The other thing we teach students is actually in the digital age, people Google people all the time. And we strongly encourage people, if they're going for an interview, to find out who they're talking to. You know, what job do they do? As I say, my very first job at Tate & Lyle, I remember very clearly being at lunchtime and, you know, because I was quite outgoing and bouncing up to people and asking what they did. And the chap just turned around to me and went, I'm the chief exec of the company. You know, and now you wouldn't make that mistake, but certainly I should have checked who that person was by looking at the annual review or something like that. I didn't do it again. The other thing is about unlocking new opportunities and building your network. So just trying to find out what's interesting and what you might want to work with. And again, just sometimes little random conversations can actually spark a common interest and make you go, oh, that's interesting. Let's have a coffee and talk about that. But for me, it's about taking charge of your brand before other people do it for you. What you want is to curate your own identity and your own reputation, rather than having a void that other people step into and do that. So what I'm going to do is talk a little bit about why I'm interested in it, why it's only just good marketing, and then pull together 7 the hot tips to try and help you develop your own brand. So I come from a brand point background, goods and services, as I say, Tesco, ran the marketing for a couple of charities, that type of thing. And the theory that underpins normal branding, normal marketing is exactly the same for personal branding. There is no difference, whatever people tell you. It is still really important to be differentiated, to stand out in the market and understand what it is that you bring as an individual. So your unique selling proposition, shortened to USP. But underneath that is the evidence. So why do people trust you? What is it that makes that they can believe you? What are the examples and the evidence? So the reason to believe. Positioning is partly also about finding your path, but what is it that you're bringing that other people don't bring? What is it that makes you different? I would really encourage some sort of trend analysis or competitor analysis as well. What are other people doing? What are people doing that you admire? You know, what have they got right? And we'll talk about that a bit more too. And I think particularly in terms of job changes and the choices people have made through their portfolio of their career, I find that fascinating. As I say, I've changed jobs. Actually, I think Brooks is my 5th career. You know, I've changed jobs a few times, but I have always done marketing. And I've always helped people understand their brands. So in a way, have I really changed jobs? I'm not so sure. Competitor analysis might be who you're up against. You know, what are other people doing other to going for those sorts of roles? Particularly target audience. Who is it you're trying to influence? Who are you branding for? Because it isn't the world. It isn't everyone. So it's working out who actually matters to you, who you think will be influential. And then the next stage, we talk about customer engagement. Customer engagement is cognitive, so what do I know? Emotional, what do I feel? And behavioural, what do I do? And we teach that. I've introduced that a lot on professional practice. And then finally, targeted communication, right at the bottom. So actually, how do I talk about myself? What channels am I in? What language am I using? Now, lucky for you, one of the things, apart from professional practice, I got COVID over Christmas. Luckily, I got no symptoms at all, managed to isolate with a bottle of wine, completely trashed Christmas, and read a lot of books on personal branding because I wanted to update the course that I'm running. I'm not going to name names, but there's an awful lot of nonsense written. The ones, so I've listened to a lot of podcasts, I've literally read 8 books, and there are an awful lot of infographics as well. The ones I've circled are the ones I think are good. The Richard Bowles book, What Colour is Your Parachute, is not really about branding, but it is about finding your path. And I've recommended this to several students. It's quite old now, but he's updated it. Start with why. The first half of this book, and particularly the TED Talk, is really worth watching, and it's thinking about your journey. Brand You is not aimed at graduates or people entering the job market. Is much more about if you run your own business, but it is very well written and has some good examples. And so I would recommend. Anyway, you don't need to read all those because I'm going to summarize them for you. So the first thing that you will see in any of these books, they say, oh, you have to write down your purpose and your mission and your values. My take on this is actually coming up with a mission statement for yourself and finding your purpose is very hard to do, and is quite unlikely if you are 21 or 18. It takes time working out what you enjoy, and over time, if you have it, absolutely fantastic, good for you. But I would say don't beat yourself up if you don't, because sometimes we change career and we find things that actually that we feel that's really fulfilling, and I will put time and effort into that. So with all these books and podcasts, there are a lot of resources out there, but they tend to not be aimed at people thinking about the start of their journey. A lot of them actually are about if you run your own business, so you are the brand of your business, how do you communicate your business, which isn't quite the same thing. And some of the books, and particularly the podcasts, are around setting you up to be a content creator. Now, to create a personal brand, you definitely have to create content, but that is different to content creating being your job. And they all seem to think that you know your path, which, as I say, I think is quite tricky. What I try and encourage people to do to find your path is really have a think when you're not in a rush, you know, maybe when you're out for a dog walk or going for a run or something like that. What do you actually do for fun? You know, what is it that makes you happy? We talk in class about, you know, if you've handed in an assignment and you've finally got a bit of time, you know, what do you read about? What blogs do you follow? Where's your energy? What are you interested in? Because quite often what you put your time and energy into, you know, is your passion. It's what you're really interested in. And somehow we think that that shouldn't connect with what we're going to do for the rest of our lives. I would argue that actually you work for an awfully long time, and to do things you're not passionate about feels a bit of a waste of time. If you have something that you are passionate about, and I give you an example, even though I'm in the business school last year, we had 2 people in my class who wanted to be chefs. And I was like, that's fantastic. Okay, so you could be a chef. Brilliant. If you're not a chef, what else could you do that still is around this passion for food? What are all the other jobs that you can almost think of it as a spider diagram that come out of that passion for food? You know, could you be a food writer? Could you run the restaurant? Could you set up events? Could you help chefs publish books? What is it that you could do that's all around that passion, and not just being a literal chef, which they actually did go on to be, but maybe later they'll think about some of those other job opportunities, almost adjacent job opportunities and career paths. So we've thought about where we're trying to go and our path and what we're good at. And then the second part is thinking about, well, how do you stand out? What makes you different, your USP? What is it that's distinctive about you that people would want to hire or give you money to set up a business or give you work to your business, for example? The 3 challenges I encourage you to do, and we're not going to do them now, is to ask 5 friends or family members to describe you in 2 sentences in a text. Tell them what it's for and say, could you say to me, you know, what is it about me that makes me different? You know, what am I about? I did this, and there were quite a few words in common. I was quite surprised. And people find it easier in a text than saying it in person, but you know, they can be good friends and family. And I really encourage you to do it. The other test, there are an awful lot of free online tests out there. My favorite is 16 personalities. And again, we do this in class, and I found it to really stimulate some good discussion. And if you don't agree with it, maybe you haven't answered the questions honestly. So go back and do it again, because all that matters is what you think about yourself, how you perceive yourself. The second element about your USP is what you're actually good at. So what are your skills? What are your strengths? Are you the listener, you know, when someone's broken up with somebody? Are you the fixer when something goes wrong? You know, for example, someone doesn't show up in a group and you're just like, well, I want to do a good job and I'm going to fix this and get the job done. Are you the leader? Perhaps you a captain of a sports team. You know, you'd be amazed how many skills come out of these leadership roles, or setting up societies at university, for example. Thinking about what is it in that role that you do, creating opportunities, bringing people with you, persuading people, listening, making sure other members of the group are heard. What is it that you're good at? And for this one, on the Brooks Careers website, which of your alumni you're still very welcome to use, you can go in through the Ab Integro resources, and there is a good strengths questionnaire in there, which is one of the best I've seen. So that one I would recommend rather than one from outside. And then there's thinking about your personal values, which is really hard. But what is it that drives you? You know, what do you think is important? Is it that actually you really want to build up a nest egg so you can go buy a house and give security to your family? Is that really motivating to you? Is that what matters to you? Or actually, is it about being recognized, people listening to your ideas, or channeling some of your creativity, which may be a bit squashed at the moment? There's a good list of values. Again, I've given on the Indeed website, which I've given the link to there. And some of those values you'll find might come out in challenge 1. If you ask your friends and family about it, what are they saying? What are they, you know, what would they say that you value? Seem to have missed 3. We'll come back to that. Okay, so then what we're trying to do is, in order for people to believe you, in order for you to have a consistent personal brand, where is your evidence based? We call that the reason to believe. What is it? Should say bringing. Sorry, spelling mistake. Bringing your reason to believe and your enthusiasm alive. So what is it about you? You know, is it something you've done? Is it an evidence of the work that you have? Maybe you work for, I don't know, at your service, for example, and you're dealing with situations under stress, or your first job on leaving Brooks. which actually wasn't quite right, but brought lots of skills. How do you spin that and say, actually, I do have all those skills. I have evidence that I'm good and I have made a difference. And we talk about being able to tell stories, tell examples through stories of what we've done with enthusiasm, to be able to say, you know, this was the situation, you know, this is the task at hand, this is what I did, the action I took as an individual, and this was the result. In interview role play, my experience is people forget the result. So they forget to say the difference that they made through whatever it was that happened. And it could be as simple as a group presentation, or it could be something that went wrong that you learned from. Or maybe it's you're wanting to work in digital, and actually you ran a digital campaign for the Hispanic Society at Brooks, for example, and you attracted lots of new members and created content. You know, where is it that you're getting this experience so you can demonstrate to people that you're credible and worth interviewing? It's really important that wherever you communicate, that is publicly available, that it is consistent. Now, people can take their own view on Facebook. My personal view is I keep Facebook for friends and family, not for work, but I know lots of academics, for example, who use Facebook in groups. I don't, actually. But that's personal. For some people, their whole lives are WhatsApp, Snapchat, and Instagram, TikTok. So it's thinking about, is that something that's closed and private, so a company couldn't find it? Or is that something that you want people to see you? In that case, you have to be consistent across, and you have to be authentically you. So not trying to make out that you're suddenly brilliant at something. I have a friend, for example, when we did our interviews for business school, who's, put down that his third language, I think, was Mandarin. And they did the whole interview in Mandarin, just to check. Because it was quite a claim, he'd said he was fluent, and they did the interview in Mandarin. And that's just a small example that you need to be, just to be really authentic. In the, I'll just do curating for a minute. One of the things that we think about with social media is that it can be both attack and defense. And I would start with defense. Defense doesn't mean being private on social media, because if you don't talk about your personal brand, other people will talk about it for you. So it's much better to be out there and create your own content and tell your story, because people will find you anyway through Google. It's very hard to be this private. However, what you need to do is, there is some stuff that is private, and you need to make sure that the settings on that are really clear, that you can't be found. Now, unfortunately, there is a lot of software out there that companies buy that they can track, and we're increasingly seeing, for example, people from Harvard, people getting a place at Harvard and getting that taken away because they found an underage drinking photo on another form of social media, for example. But I would always argue, take the mum test. Would you be happy for your mum to see it? If you're on social media, would you be happy for your mum to see it, or dad? Just going back one, being found in the right places is really key. So having a voice, and that may be, maybe you're really into sports and you think, actually, I'm not doing it now, but my dream job really would be in sports sponsorship. Do you follow sports on the channels that companies can find you on? Do you comment on sports personalities? Do you have a voice? And if you're an academic, can you be found where other people are commenting in your specialism? Do you have a voice? Are you talking on Twitter, for example? Working back up, some of that also then about your reason to believe is thinking about that evidence base. Where are the photos? Where's the videos? What have you done? How do people see that? Again, rather than seeing a void and guessing what you might be like. How do you put down, where are the links? I had somebody last year, Chloe, who's incredibly creative and already doing very well in the music business, but she made really sure that the links to her music portfolio were in everything. They were dynamically on her CV. They, she put them with interviews. She brought the portfolio with her, straight click through on LinkedIn, etc. So all of her different communications were consistent and were authentic, which is partly about communicating your expertise. So communicating your brand, and I've touched on this already, but what is the right channel for your target audience? Okay, and really think about this. As I said, for me, it's not really Facebook, but that for others, it really is. If you are in a business and you're selling stuff, then Pinterest and Instagram are absolutely key. And we're seeing some really, I mean, even in my area of nonprofits, we're seeing some really interesting use of Twitter to try and engage younger audiences in nonprofit causes and sort of civic engagement, for example. We learn orally, we learn visually. Yeah, so in things like infographics, things like podcasts are absolutely key. So if you just gradually, you don't need to be doing all the day unless you are wanting to be a content creator. But you do need to be active. You need to be regular and consistent, unless you want it to be your full-time job, in which case do it full-time. But it isn't enough just to like something on LinkedIn. It is much better to find things that are relevant to what you're interested in and just add a couple of lines, have a point of view about it. Because what we're trying to do is build that sort of authentic personality. Can you be found? Yeah, are you tagged? Do the bits of social media link up? Do your photos, do they have descriptors underneath them? Do you have a niche that you specialize in? If you do, fantastic. And this leads through to the passion point. If you have a niche, then you're laughing. You know, that is much better because you can find the target audience much more clearly. One of the things I do work with people on is really thinking about developing personal branding, and particularly social media networks, not about taking, but about giving. So how are you using your network to help other people, not just as a showcase to promote your stuff? Because to be honest, that's a bit boring, and it's fine to do a bit of it. But how do you use your network? Do you share information that you found really interesting that someone else might find interesting, or just listen to a great podcast, or been surprised by a bit of market data? Are you going to a free online event that other people that you know might be really interested in, but perhaps just didn't spot? And I do quite a lot of this. You know, how do I, if someone's really interested in finding out about an area, how do we put them in touch with someone else who can help them? And that's the real advantage of something like LinkedIn, is that they can message them and say, would you mind talking to me for 10 minutes on Zoom one evening? I'm really interested in this. You know, and I feel valued because I can put people in touch that have something in common. And at someday, you know, that person might call it in and say, Sarah, can you help me with this person? And that absolutely is how it works. You know, how do you, through the things that you're interested in, how do you help other people have happiness through that? How do you, you know, share things that are interesting, or, you know, just have a bit of fun with it? How do you do that in terms of giving, not just receiving? And my analogy for this would be, you know, your LinkedIn community particularly shouldn't be like a Pokemon card deck. You're not just trying to collect people. If you can't think what you're going to give to that person or how they could help you in the future, then what's the point? You know, you're not really trying to get 1,000 followers. You're trying to say, actually, yes, I'll link with you because I'd be really happy to write a reference for you later. Or I might like to invite you to an event, or I want to pick your brains on a piece of research that I'm kicking off on volunteering. You know, and with that specific example, I reached out to 10 people I know in charities and went, do you think this is a good idea, or do you think it's all been done before? You know, and it's pretty light touch. People will come back, and if they're busy, they just tend to go, I'll come back to you next week. That's fine. And it seems to work much better than an email. My last point would be, the world is not only online. So when you're thinking about your personal branding, ditch the books that say it's about social media content, because actually you meet people in real life. And when you do that, do you look the part? Do you look like the job that you want to get, the path that you want to be on? Okay, I've deliberately put this image up rather than somebody in a pinstripe suit, because we don't know what the young woman in this picture wants to do. And it may be she wants to be an influencer. It may be she wants to run a clothing business. It may be she's a film creator. We don't all have to look like accountants all the time. It depends on what you're trying to do and what your path is. The second point is thinking about your pitch. The amount of people who, when they meet you in person and they say to you, what do you do? Or, you know, what's your thing? What do you do? If you can't do that quickly, fluently, and with a smile in 1 or 2 or 3 sentences, you've missed the moment, you've missed the opportunity. I once had somebody very senior who ran a big advertising agency, and he'd very kindly given me a summer job. And he said, "Oh, come over for a coffee and find out how you're getting on." And he was in the middle, he was about to go bankrupt, and he turned around to me and said, "How can I help you?" And I had no idea how he could help me. And I always regret, what I should have said is, "I can't think of anything at the moment. Would you have coffee with me in 5 years?" Because then I would have known what the answer is. The third point is thinking when you meet people, so you're telling stories in person, you're telling people about your what you've done, perhaps in an interview or in a assessment center situation, or if you're going in asking for money, so if you set up a business and you want money, resources and people to support you, are you really clear about your stories? So have you got the hook? Have you got the evidence? Have you got the outcome, the difference that you made? Because we need to always have a bank of stories. Stories are 22 times more powerful than just listing the fact. So wrapping it around in person, how telling a story about what you've done, why you're different is really important. The researching your target audience matters just as much in real life as it does as when you go onto social media, or if you produce a marketing planning class. Yeah. Are you following them? Do you know what they do? Have you listened to what they're actually saying? What are the points they're making and what are the points they're not making? And how actively have you engaged with them? As I mentioned before, you should always know who you're talking to, and the chances are they will have Googled you. Yeah, they will have found out, that actually you talk a lot about sport in your CV, but there's no images of you on sport at all can be found on social media. And they would find that weird and they will ask you about that. Okay. And if you put down your languages, be prepared to answer the question. Consistency, absolutely crucial. So are you consistent? The person that they meet in person, so the person they meet in real life, is that consistent with how you present yourself online? Do you look like you in your photos? But also, remember, it's give and receive. How can you help them? What are you going in to offer? And maybe that's your role as a digital native, or maybe because that's you're particularly passionate about the subject and you bring with it all this enthusiasm. And the final part of whether people get hired or whether people get opportunities is actually cultural fit is the only thing that matters. Whether people can work with you, because however qualified you are, if they think you'll be unhappy or disruptive, they won't hire you. So it's brilliant to have the evidence. It's brilliant to stand out, but it's really important that your real personality shines through, because otherwise you'll get jobs where you will be unhappy. So what I was trying to say when we talk about personal branding is, what's your story? How do we believe you? What is it that you are bringing? And is it credible? Is there anything that makes you stand out? Is there anything that's differentiated? And the chances are some of that will come through the things that you do for fun, the things that you do in your spare time, where your energy goes. What is it that you're interested in and read about, whether that's online on your phone or you follow or you take part in, because that's part of who you are and that's really important. So that is part of you being differentiated and standing out. Have you been really consistent across all the different channels? And if they meet you in person, would they recognize you from the person that you're presenting online? And particularly, do you come across as authentic? So is it real? Because if it's not real, they will find out. Underpin what you're saying about yourself with proof. If you don't have the evidence about your achievements or your skills or your interests, it really raises questions about who is the real you, and whether those were really important. And again, they link through to the story. Where's the evidence? And finally, what matters is what type of person you are, because people buy from people. And that is why Richard Branson has a lot of followers, many more so than, Virgin. The people connection is what comes across through personal branding. And I know the clue's in the name, but that's the big thing to remember. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing and see if we can get any. What do we think? Ephraim, I'm going to pick on you because I know you.
Sure. Thank you very much, Sarah.
No problem.
This has come at a really good time for me because I am trying to work with athletes and trying to get youth and younger athletes to begin to think about branding principles. So what's really interesting is, as a parent with two athletes, my son's in motorcycle racing and my daughter's in gymnastics. What we actually see is parents managing brands and almost creating an identity of the youth athlete before they have had a chance themselves. And it's actually, there's actually quite a few interesting dynamics there. But what I really enjoyed about going through Brooks in a few classes in the Masters was being able to take it back to the individual component in terms of going back to the personal values. And I actually really enjoyed how you've actually laid it out. And for myself as well, I'm also kind of reconditioning myself and asking, me, who am I, post-Masters as well, and kind of that. I haven't had 5 careers such as yourself yet, but I have had a few chapters where it would actually require some kind of sharpening and repositioning. So just wanted to say thank you very much for sharing that, not only for me personally.
Yeah, the point you make about young athletes, though, I think is really interesting, because actually, we develop as people. Our identities evolve, and the things that we're passionate about, we find new things, and the things that matter to us, maybe early on, which is particularly some things about security, or actually even just proving ourselves before we have kids, that type of thing. Our values hopefully are consistent, but the sort of some of the drivers change. And that's okay. That's absolutely fine. We talk about squiggly careers, don't we? Or portfolio careers, if you want to be more grown up. But it is interesting about this difference particularly with younger athletes, about the fact that actually, when they then go on to have a voice and curate their own stuff, not have it curated for them, we see a shift. And hopefully that's an evolution, not a revolution. But yeah, I wish you luck with that.
Thank you. Sure, absolutely. It's also quite interesting as well, because I think moving forward, if we think about 20 years ago, where a lot of these brands were actually managed by corporations, some of these athletes have the social media, have the tools, and actually understand it better than some brand managers. So there's some really interesting dynamics to see how it's going to evolve.
And just broadening out your point, I mean, it is interesting when we go and work for companies. So when I worked for Tesco, I used to run the club card, and I had someone who tweeted for me. Charities always did it myself, but because the tone of voice of the tweet, for example, and the social media was incredibly important. What we're putting out on social media was really valuable, and you see people, because they have to understand the tone of voice, but they also are as an individual. So that's a really responsible job that people have, talking, and often it can go wrong. Some classic examples of that. But what about the others? What about you, Gina, with your coaching hat on?
I was thinking, well, one thing I thought about myself, and I thought I need to invest some more time in the sort of Instagram and linking it in with, not so much Instagram, but linking it with my LinkedIn. And I do think about that stuff, but I kind of think people make their own minds up in a way, and it's quite hard to know how what you write about yourself lands with others when you're in a particular profession. And the other thing I was thinking about was, my kind of area of interest today was more around how people can sort of develop their profile internally and in a corporate organization. So I'm thinking of high potential and talent groups that I work with. So less about kind of getting into the organization, but developing their internal brand so that they're seen, particularly when trying to move into more senior leadership roles, etc. And I'm thinking in particular about women and ethnic minority groups, because I think it can be much more difficult for them to raise a profile and raise a brand that maybe is slightly counterculture to the dominant leadership culture in a large business. So I mean, I've worked with it. I'm thinking of one woman in particular that I've worked with about how she might go about doing that and sort of finding her authentic leadership voice, really.
And accessing good coaching. It's interesting. My sister-in-law, funnily enough, helps women in finance to get onto boards. So she helps people at director level do that last shift, if you see what I mean. And so they're quite visible, but actually sometimes they need the right support to then just make that last shift. You know, they're pretty successful people. You know, I think that's interesting. Also, if you end up in a big company, being seen by people who do the talent management globally, it is a real job to do. You know, so being spotted by the people who are sitting at the center, because the talent managers, whatever the title is, it varies by organization, but ABF Twinings, they were called talent managers, and they went around globally finding good people and managing their careers with them. It's really interesting how that worked. So you had to be on their radar. They were the target audience, actually, not the bosses. You had to be on their radar to then get seen and get the good jobs. And then it became a closed shop. It was quite interesting how it worked. Temwa, what about you? What stage are you at? Remind me. Maybe she's gone for a cup of tea.
Oh, sorry. Can you ask me the question again?
Yes. Can you remind me, Temwa, you have finished at Brooks? Or are you still here?
Yes, I finished and graduated last year, MSc Finance.
Perfect. And what are you doing now?
I'm working as a lecturer at University of Malawi.
Oh, very good. Lucky you. Fantastic.
Yeah.
Are you with the Cyclones?
Yeah.
Yeah. So this comes back to my point about what's your target audience. So it is thinking about, you know, who is it? It's not trying to have a social media presence for the world. Yeah. And well, maybe you will. Congratulations. Most people work out that actually they want to achieve, there are some target audiences that they particularly need to influence. And that may be for you, Temwa, that may be within the country space around the education, as you know, the educators within Malawi, but it might also be within your subject space. So what you're writing on in terms of finance, so that you reach outside the country, but by subject, and almost picking those two communities and not worrying about anybody else, you know, because otherwise you'll end up as a content creator, which is a great job, but perhaps it's not the same as being a lecturer. Okay, what about Junaid or Ashley? Everyone else can now tell that I pick on people in my lectures, can't they?
Well, fortunately, I can tell you do pick on people, but thank you so much. I know I've been spotlighted, but however, I feel as if in my case, given that I wear quite a number of hats, my audience gets to be very broad. So when I'm within triathlon spaces, one time I've got athletes only and parents and coaches looking at me because I'll be wearing an athlete's representative hat. And then on the other side of the coin, I do have coaches and athletes again, and this time around with more administrators looking at me because I'll be wearing a technical official hat. So when it comes to then building that brand, it's about then being able to tell a story that resonates with everyone who's actually the relevant stakeholder, which is the athletes, the parents, the administrators, and me as well, because I'm also part of the same brand.
Yeah, well, you are your own brand, obviously, and you have those different roles. You know, that's all part of who you are. And actually, it might be that those different audiences that you highlight maybe pick up information in different ways. You know, maybe for some people it's about the soundbite. Some people might be more interested in hearing from you through a podcast or something where you give more insight. But you should definitely fix up with Ephraim, who's on the thing here, because we've got a whole athlete thing going on. So Ephraim, take down the name. Okay, I know we're getting very tight on time. Has anybody got any questions that just to wrap up on before we go? Joy, you're on a social media mission now.
Yeah, so I've got a lot of catching up to do in my time.
good.
But,
All good. Start with LinkedIn.
yeah, I am
You're
there.
going to do one thing, sort
Yeah.
LinkedIn out, make it dynamic, not like a passive CV. I'm not saying yours is, but other people's
no, I think guilty as charged, but thanks.
Not at all. Okay, everybody else all right? But thank you very much for joining us and for coping with the screen sharing and me not be able to see the chat and everything. But I wish you great success with your personal brands.
I want to say thank you, Sarah, very much for a really interesting session. I think it really spoke strongly to all of us, wherever we are in our journey. And the fact that you said, you know, it changes, and who you feel you are at 18 or 21 changes throughout your life, and keep revisiting it. You mentioned just in that last bit around keep your LinkedIn profile, you know, live. And that's the same for thinking about who you are and what your brand is, I think. So thank you very much indeed for a great session, relevant to all of us in the room here.